Hey everyone, it is lunch with Mal, and I'm just gonna do a quick audio check because I don't know for sure that audio is good. Woohoo! So you might have thought that I was dead or something. I'm here. Uh, in case you missed previous lunch with Mal's, we moved from New Brunswick, Canada, to Saskatchewan, Canada, which is about 2,700 miles or 4,200 kilometers, depending on which measuring system you use. And it was quite the event. I got to Saskatchewan last Monday, and um, that was after a 4-day drive where I left at about 2 o'clock on Friday from New Brunswick, and I got to Saskatchewan at about 1 o'clock on Monday. So there were some long days. There was a 16-hour day. Hey, Miss Ocampo. Indeed, Saskatchewan is actually a pretty cool place to move to. So I'm actually pretty stoked that I'm here, and this is actually where I grew up too. So it's kind of strange after being away for 25 years, coming back home. I'm not sure if any of you ever had an experience like that, but we have our house. Our stuff came here last Thursday. I was actually thinking about doing lunch with Mel last Thursday, but then the truck driver said I'm going to arrive a day early, so he did. So I was helping unloading a massive moving truck last Thursday. And now we have people in our basement demoing it, ripping everything out because, and I knew this before we bought the house, there'd be mold down there. The upstairs is clean; it was freshly renovated and everything like that. But the basement is no bueno, and I knew it. I knew it before we bought the house, um, which caused me to offer them a bunch less money, and they took it. Hello, Angel. Yeah, I expect that there shall be no break in the Thursday lunch with Mal until who knows what, maybe Christmas time or something like that. I guess American Thanksgiving I might not do one as well. We shall see. Thanks. Thanks, Dharma. I'm The new setup is coming along. I'm not sure this is all the permanent places everything will go. There is a lot of mess that you can't see. My office is the messiest room because it's also where all the tools are living as we do all the things in the house. Um, yeah, yesterday I mounted a barn door. This morning I ran a water line from the sink to the fridge underneath the floor because the roof's all ripped out in the basement, so I was able to do that. And after they ripped out everything in the basement, I've made a determination I need to rerun all new ductwork for the heating and AC system. So lots going on. Yeah, I've absolutely promoted my works at book fairs. Okay, well, I've done lots of signings and stuff like that. I've also done comic cons and things like that for selling my books too. And I think it's actually a really good experience for all authors, whether you make any money or not, break even, whatever. The act of hand selling your book to someone gives you a lot of actually really interesting insight about your book and how people respond to your pitch. Because normally, we just sort of make pitches on the internet and we don't see someone's face, but you can like as you're describing your book, you watch their face, you can see how they're reacting to different things in your story, and you adjust your pitch. And it's actually super useful to learn what attracts people and what kind of things you can say that are like guaranteed sell and what kind of things cause people to say that's nice and walk away. Um, I figured you would, Dharma. You're a very, very personable person, so I get that for sure. Um, yeah, so here we are in Kanakistan, all safe and sound in Western Canada. And it's kind of wild because we were able to get this house cheap enough. We bought it for cash. Um, and we're now in a place where the unemployment is only 2.3%, and the housing market isn't ridiculous. Saskatchewan's a pretty fortunate part of the country. It has the strongest economy in Canada right now. And part of that is it's very mineral rich here. 97% of the world's uranium. Only one of two places in the world where you can get potash. So some pretty cool stuff. Hey, Chuck, I'm here. I'm live, and I might change the name of this, by the way, from Lunch with Mel to Brunch with Mel because it's only 10 o'clock in the morning for us. Although I think I'm going to keep doing it at noon Eastern Standard because that's what everybody's used to. Interestingly, Saskatchewan is like Arizona; it doesn't do daylight savings. So whenever DST ticks over, for me, it'll actually be at 11. Um, Eastern, which I feel like brunch with Mel would actually still work. So we'll see. We'll see if I change the name or not. Um, how many books do you bring to book fairs? I want to learn. It really depends on the fair. I try to find out from the people running it how many attendees there's going to be. This is for this question. Like what how many attendees they expect, how on brand you are for like the fair. Like I don't know. I've been to a lot of fairs where like the majority of the authors were romance, and I knew being a sci-fi author, I'm not going to sell too much, so I only brought like 20 or 30 books. I've had other ones that were things like Comic Cons where I bring over 100 books, so it's kind of hard to say. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good number then. If they told you to bring 20 and you were 25, I think that'll be a pretty safe number to have. So yeah, it's nice to see people here during the summertime. It always gets a little bit iffy, especially because I've been so sporadic this year. Doing lunch with Mel, or at least this summer, because in April we moved from Boston to New Brunswick, and it took a while to get settled. We kind of got our groove, and then we went for a 2-week vacation here in Saskatchewan, and decided, yeah, we're buying a house here, and so that messed things up, and then we had to pack, and it's been crazy. We actually were planning on my daughter and I first coming here for 3 weeks to do a bunch of the reno work before we moved all of our stuff, but circumstances screwed that up, and we just ended up moving really early. We were trying to I wanted to get a U-Haul to bring a bunch of my tools here so we could start getting everything going with my daughter, but I booked it weeks in advance, but Labor Day weekend rolled around, which is when we were going to need to get the truck, and New Brunswick had no one-way trucks. There were in the entire province, there wasn't a single one-way U-Haul truck that we could take to Saskatchewan. So Jill and I talked about it, and we talked to the moving company, and I said, hey, do you just want to move next week? And so that's what we did. We packed our house up in about 9 days and moved out here. So, and of course, the way it always goes is one of the most important boxes I can't find. It's got my favorite keyboard, my favorite mouse, and a few other, like my new microphone that I bought. All that stuff is in whatever box this is, and it's hiding somewhere. Hopefully you guys can't hear the sound of the Sawzall cutting through something awful downstairs. Or at least it's making an awful sound. Hey, Judith, nice to see you too. But like I said, they're demoing the basement, so it's really loud. But usually things like StreamYard are good at filtering that stuff out. So tell me, folks, what's going on with everybody right now? How are you guys doing? Who's having good times? Who's having woes in the book world? What do you guys have going on? I'm curious to hear about it. I've seen a lot of people posting about how their Facebook, the bottom fell of their Facebook ads in September, which is unusual because usually September is when the summer slump ends and things pack back up again. But I'm curious what people have going on. There's also just an excuse for me to take a bite of my bagels, which I'm dying for here. I probably shouldn't have made bagels right before lunch with Mel. Like, oh, this is a very brunchy kind of food, but it's also something that is really hard to chew. That's a really good question, Angel. And of course, you mean the big difference is not 2025; it's post July. End of June 30th is when Facebook yeeted out about 90% of all author targets. They didn't just do this to the writing world. They did this across the board. They're trying to remove a lot of specific targets of people or organizations and stuff like that to make more general targets, more genre-based targeting. On paper, those targets are supposed to still work until January, but they really don't. They've really stopped working. And of course, if you have an ad using those author targets, you can't edit it because it'll make you change those targets before you can save the ad, which is super annoying. The biggest thing with MM and any more spicy romance or topics in general is if you try to go, you find the most extreme authors. So with MM, I always found the spiciest, most erotic, dark romance authors out there because I figured if a reader read Melissa Foster or something like that, they're not going to bat an eye at seeing two dudes. They might not read it, but at least they're not going to report the ad and cause problems. And that's gone away now. If you're running an MM ad, you're probably going to have to target contemporary romance or romance novels as your target. Audience targeting has really just boiled down to the broadest, most generic uh, genre targeting that you can do. Um, and then everything from there is making sure that your ad creative sends the right message. That if you're writing romance, your ad creative probably needs to show two dudes in some sort of romantic situation, a pose or something like that. Or if you did a setting creative, it needs to scream like romance everywhere, like in all of the text that you have. Because what you really want to do is at the very beginning of the learning phase for that, you want to make it so that anybody who does not want to read romance scrolls on by and does not pay attention to your ad, and people who are interested click. You want to make it like on the nose, um, so that when Facebook comes out of the learning phase, it will have an idea of what subsegment of those audiences. And the AI, we're in a world now where, for better or for worse, all of the audience targeting is done by AI. If you're doing Advantage Plus, it's AI right from the get-go. If you turn off Advantage Plus and use like the original or legacy targeting options in Facebook, then you have a little more control at the beginning, but eventually it's going to flip over and just use AI targeting for everything as well. So it's really all about just being on the nose. Yeah, CM Mason says that using author targets has severely hurt my ad performance. And I would say that for authors, up until June, the best performing ads for romance were all author targeted. And actually for my sci-fi as well, best performing ads were author targeted ads. And in end of June, when they flipped that switch, things changed dramatically. And it's taking a lot more work now to find things. And what really comes down to, think about it, is like you've got, let's stick with our romance example here. You've got some romance, and you're just going to target romance novels and contemporary romance for your targets. That's probably, like, depending on the age range you pick, probably 10 to 15 million people, right? The learning phase for an ad generally only lasts 1,000 impressions. So you could imagine, out of 10 to 15 million people, you take 1,000 people of that massive audience, you could get all evangelical Christians, or you could get all super queer people, right? Just to give you two broad examples, or any mix in between. And as a result, you could have the exact same ad do great and do terrible if you made duplicates and started them 5 minutes apart, because that initial learning phase, just that first 1,000 people that sees the ad, could be wildly different and could cause the ad to go great or not so great. And so one of the things I think we're going to have to start doing a lot more is just, if it doesn't work, make it again. I think as we get through the end of this year, we're going to get a much better idea of what kind of creative really clicks and what kind of creative doesn't click. So hopefully we'll be like, okay, because if you make it, like, say you remake the same ad 5 times and it doesn't work, you're like, okay, my creative must suck. Hopefully as we get to the end of this year, we'll have a much better idea of like what kind of creative is going to really clue the AI in to what you write and what kind of creative isn't. So we might know maybe by 2 or 3 if it's the ad creator or the audience. It's going to be a bit of a learning phase process for us to kind of all figure out what's working and what's not in that regard. Darwin says, I recently turned in my debut sapphic witchy urban fantasy to my freelance editor, a quarter of the way through recording the audiobook. That's awesome. By the way, congrats. That's awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that does for you. I think there's a huge audience for that kind of stuff. Finding the audience may be tricky, but the audience is absolutely there. Chuck says, started outlining my first sci-fi Star Trek style space opera. I think it's best to advertise starting after the first one is done, or wait till the series is established. So this is sort of the age-old question, right? When do I start running paid advertising for my series? I'll get to your question, Angel, because I have a lot of thoughts on book-like audiences. And if you've only got one book, so most books need 2 or 3 books in a series for ads to be profitable, because ads are expensive. Let's face it, paid advertising is expensive, and you need that read-through. I've only encountered maybe a dozen books that can long-term be profitable on book 1. Usually all books maybe are like maybe for a little bit they're profitable on ads on book 1, but eventually all books are no longer profitable on book 1, except for like a handful that I've encountered that just perennially sell so well that even book 1 continues to be profitable. Um, like one of them, by the way, is biracial with woman, like plus size woman, romance, profitable on book one for like 6 years now. So you never know what it might be. It doesn't have to be something that's just in the middle of the road. Anyway, so yeah, so a lot of times you might, if you're running, you could run ads on book one, even when you just on book one, and just say like, you know what, this is audience building. This is me building a readership. I don't expect this ad to be profitable. I'm just going to let it sort of trundle along at $5 a day, and just sort of like hope that it all pans out in the end. That's one way of doing it. The more safe way is wait until book two is out and book three is on pre-order. That can be a pretty solid way to do that. But another way is write a 10,000 word reader magnet prequel story, complete story, beginning, middle, and end, not a prologue, not a prelude, but like a whole complete story focusing on one of the major characters at least from book one. And then you run ads to that. You put in book funnel, run ads to that, and that way you can actually build a newsletter. You can build an audience for your books before they're even out. You do that before book one even comes out, about a month or so. And then when book one launches, you have like 1,000, 2,000 person mailing list ready to go to talk about book one. Then at least you're getting something in return. You're getting a mailing list, and you're getting people into the series. That's kind of what I recommend doing until you've got a few more books in the series, because that mailing list is far more valuable than, $5 a day ad spend. Like if you're spending $5 a day on ads, maybe you get $5 a day back on just book one. The mailing list is more valuable than that amount of money, because that amount of money is what, $150 a month. Well, what if you could get like a 1,000, maybe at $5 a day, 1,000 is maybe a little bit high. But if you get 500 email addresses a month instead, I think that's super valuable. All right. I don't like using lookalike audiences because Facebook doesn't tell us how they make them. We have some pretty good ideas about how Facebook makes them. Think about what Facebook's for. It's for advertising products. And it's not built for us. It's built for large companies. It's built for Procter and Gamble and General Motors and Apple and stuff like that. And so all of those companies have a lot of demographic information, know a lot of things about who buys their products. A lot of it's price based, and Facebook knows the price of the product that's being advertised. They click the link, they go look at the product page, they know how much the product costs. Their systems are very good at determining that. Because if you try to sell a car, you better believe you're not getting 20 cents per click. You're going to pay $2 a click if you're advertising cars and stuff like that. And that's because Facebook knows who's interested in buying a car right now, and they're only showing car ads to people who are interested in buying a car. And they know that if they can deliver people that are more likely to buy to people selling cars, they can charge a premium for that. And that's what they do. That's why we basically just get the bottom of the barrel. We get the people who aren't buying anything else at all right now. So if Facebook has a system for lookalikes, for building demographical information on people, it's going to have a hierarchy of things that it considers to be the most important when it comes to building similarities. And that's not, do they read MD Cooper books? It's college educated, own their own house, own their own car, have kids, rent, lease. How old are their kids? How old are they? What kind of neighborhood do they live in? What city do they live in? Well, are they politically aligned? In theory, it's not in there. It has to be in there, especially once they start using AI to do all of this stuff, because the AI is just going to look at like all of your sentiment across the board. It's all high level spend demographic based, and probably down toward the bottom is what kind of movies, TV shows, and books do they read. But when you build a lookalike audience, it's absolutely building on things like, I mean, you hate to say it, but like skin color, race, wealth, that sort of thing. That's what lookalike audiences build on first and foremost, and then maybe down the road. Now, it is worth noting that for a lot of us, because we write what we know, our writing probably appeals to people who are racially, ethnically, demographically similar to us. So, but not always. That's not always the case. So it's very likely that if you're writing, small town contemporary romance, that you're going to appeal to people who are actually small town people and have some of the same sentimentalities. Not always, because spicy small town is picked up a lot as well. But it's a risky thing in that regard, because it could be on things that are meaningless to us as authors. So that's why I'm not super keen on using lookalike audiences. You could always try it. Always, like I always say, like try it, see what happens. Because also when it builds a lookalike audience, so what Facebook does is it goes out, the default is 1%. Okay, so let's say Facebook recently pruned out a lot of their, who they say is like an actual Facebook user in the United States. So like maybe it's like 200 million people in the United States now. Um, so of that 200 million people in the United States, 1% is 2 million. So what they do is they take like your page, your Instagram, your website activity, whatever it might be, and they find the 2 million people in the United States that are closest to the people that you gave it as input. But you don't know if they're readers, right? Like readers is unlikely to be a major component of that lookalike audience. So then you still have to filter down. You take your lookalike audience and you filter down by, at least do they read fiction or something like that. And now you're going to have an even smaller audience. Well, if you're going to do that filtering, why not just start with the bigger audience to begin with and then filter down by readers? And Facebook actually, and they're right about this, they say what you want to do is you want to go with the biggest audience you could reasonably go with now. Because of the way the AI targeting works, if you narrow down too much and you start with a smaller audience of 2 million, you narrow down again, you're going to end up with an ad that doesn't last very long, unfortunately. All right. So Judith says my 7th page off, and hold with my editor and wait for the cover from 100 covers. Nice, that's great. And yeah, and pour over that blurb, right? Like you gotta nail it. I suppose there is a point where you're too much time for a blurb, but it's hard to get there, right? Because it's gotta be good. I always sleep on my blurbs. I write the blurb, I go to sleep. I write the blurb, I go over a bunch and I hate it. I go to sleep and I wake up with the perfect idea. It's my process. If I keep trying to write it without like sleeping in between, I just waste my time. Well, thriller genre, most are obviously standalone. Would ads be useless there? Well, it depends on the kind of thrillers. Like a lot of thrillers are connected in some way. Like like Lee Child, all of his thrillers, they're all standalones, but they're all connected. So he's going to get read through. Stephen King, same sort of thing. So you just sort of have to think about different ways about how you manage your read through. Do you do it by tying characters together? Do you do it with back of book? Like, hey, if you enjoyed this book of mine, you're really going to love this book because it touches on the same themes or has some of the same characters or whatever it might be. The main thing is that it gets harder to track with thrillers. Anything where the reading isn't linear through the series, it's harder to track, exactly how much money an ad's earned. But there are ways of doing that. It's just kind of it's a little bit squishier. But no, lots of authors who write thrillers do very, very well with ads. Ads are a mainstay of thrillers as well than anything else. Yes, I mean he's right. They want more control over the ads. They want to make it so they have to manage less data, and they just want to let the AI do it and not have to manage all the minutia of what people like and whatnot. They'll just let the AI go through and just figure it all out through magic AI methods. No, so they're not magic AI methods, but they definitely do want more control, and they're removing our control more and more. The tricky thing is like as they make the ad platform more, we do everything for you, and you as the advertiser do less. They sort of do away with the value of their ad platform to a certain extent, because if you make it work super duper well for everyone, well then it doesn't really work that well for anyone, because you just take it. It's like too little butter spread over too much bread kind of situation. And I think that might end up hurting a lot of the really big advertisers who spend a lot of their money on Facebook, unless they get special preferential treatment. But like that's like the thing is like if you work extra hard on your ads, you make them really good, and you don't do any better than anybody else, then we all make just crappy garbage ads because it's not worth spending much time on them because we have no control anyway, and we all make crappy garbage ads. The AI can't really tell if they're good or not because it can't. Some of the stuff it comes up with is terrible, and then the users hate all the ads and they stop using the platform. Like I don't know, there's probably a much longer, more thought out podcast I could do on that, but I just sort of feel like whenever you have a system that stops rewarding well done things, and gives well done things no more exposure than the something that's just like churned out like a completely AI customized built ad, you remove the value in the platform. I think that will come back to bite them. Lauren says specifically domestic thrillers don't have connection. I saw an author recently switch for domestic thrillers. He's had a lot of success. That's a couple grand in the first week, a month, and it stops. Seems you be playing more of that. Yeah, a lot of people do that. I'm going to remove this because it's blocking my face. A lot of people will spend a lot of money in the first few weeks. The problem is that that's actually your lowest return on ad. Like in the first few weeks, you have all this buzz from all of these things that are honestly more cost effective than ads. Your newsletter, swaps, just release emails coming from BookBub and stuff like that, doing some paid newsletter stuff. All of that stuff is more bang for buck than ads. And most of that stuff really only works right at release. So why blow a bunch of money on paid advertising at release time when you have all these cheaper things working for you? I know a lot of I worked with authors. We've dumped like $10,000-$20,000 on during release month, and I look at it and like, this would have been so much more effective if we spread it out through the year and made your tail longer, and had you more, give you more, use it on your backlist to give you more books that are ranking well versus blowing it all on this one book in this short window. It does work for some people. I just personally don't think it's that efficient. I think it's a very inefficient way to spend money. Domestic thrillers are one of the hardest. You're right. What you're writing is one of the hardest ones to sort of create connection between the books. And you can do with ads. Like some of the I would say what half of those ads that I've seen for books that were like half of the ads where book one can be profitable perennially, they are domestic thrillers or psychological thrillers, which usually are a lot of the times are pretty closely related. So it can be done. It just depends on the book to some degree. Some people, what they'll do also is they'll take domestic thrillers they've written with really similar themes and they'll put them in a collection, and then they advertise the collection, a box set, if you will. And that can work pretty well too, because then you get more KU read out of the ad, and that works out to make the ad profitable. So that's another option you could play with as well. Right, so it's like being a jack of all trades. You can't focus and pull your effort in one particular thing if you're spread all over the place. Indeed, it's true. Dharma says that explains a lot of the crappy web ads. Yes, it does, because all the AI tools are just turning them out. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and they're talking about we don't need ad block, we need AI slop block. I'm okay with seeing good ads, but I'm tired of seeing AI slop. I want a Chrome extension that just blocks AI slop. And I thought, the downside, they would have to use AI to detect AI slop, but I kind of like the idea. So speaking of cool things going on, a bunch of you guys were mentioned, because I mentioned cool things that you have going on right now, releases and sort of thing. I have on Amazon tomorrow my first solo release in almost 5 years, and a little bit over 4 years for my first release with the since I've had release with the co-author. So it's a second book in a series I have called The Ascension War, and it's 152,000 words, and it took me forever to write because I did the dumb thing and I tried to fold too many plots into one book, thinking that now that I've written over 100 books, I could totally do this, only to discover that it works great in book one when you're opening up all the plot lines, but then in book two, when you sort of incrementally move all the plots along, how do you give 20 different plot lines some sort of reasonable conclusion or contribution across this entire book? So I had to rip it apart and completely restructure everything. But yeah, first release in around 5 years for me, and with only I'm not really promoting this one outside of my existing readership, because like I said, it's book two in a series that you have to probably write about 45 other books to really get. So it doesn't have massive appeal to a new audience. I'm working on some things that will have massive appeal to new audiences, but I've actually got like 240 pre-orders, which I'm pretty stoked about, because pre-orders do not come as easily as they used to. And just by hitting my list and reaching out to my readers, I've got that many. And I've sold 50 or 60 direct on my website as well already. So I'm pretty stoked about that too. Turns out I'm still an author. All right. So CM Mason says, do you think there's a shift in audience genre preferences? My gothic paranormal romance has nearly stopped performing. My upcoming fairy tale fantasy has more pre-orders than all 4 of my books combined. Fairy tale fantasy is big right now. I do wonder if people are looking for more otherworldly reading. I don't know if that how that fits for what you described, because your gothic or gothic paranormal could be more otherworldly than your fairy tale. I'm not sure, but I think more pure escapism is definitely doing well. There are people who like to stay gritty and grounded, so I think there's obviously still room for stuff that does that. But I do feel like I mean, people's taste shift all the time, whether it's world events related or not. It always does happen, and it also could just be that something's changed in some sort of promotional algorithm, be it on Amazon or Facebook, that has caused just people who like a certain thing to see a little bit less of it. It's really hard to say exactly how it all pans out. Thank you, Judith. I'm glad that you pre-ordered. Woo. Stop being awesome. I'm decently okay. I don't know that I would describe myself as awesome, but I guess other people can. So yeah, that's what I got going on. So it is. So I guess I should say along those lines. Next week in school, because I know some of you are in school. That's storyteller.net. That's our community for authors. I'm actually going to be starting a class on how we deal with the AI. How we deal with how AI are making decisions about who sees our ads, and what we can do with our ad creative to make sure our ads or to help our ads get in front of the right people. So a lot of what we're talking about today, about like how targeting is just not working the way that it used to. How do we get around that? That's all stuff that I'll be talking about in that class. If you're interested in joining our school community, it's $37 a month, and you don't have to sign up for a year. You can sign up for months, soak up a bunch of courses and videos I've made about different things, and then peace out. That's cool. And you get access to all of the classes and webinars and courses we do when you're in school. So you can sign up and partake of this stuff. I'll be starting next week. So yeah. And good morning, Tim. Tim being what is Pig Monster Tim or Chad? It's one of my readers. It's Tim. Tim, because Tim always had like a white circle for his profile. That's how I should know. All right. Well, I got a call coming up with a client actually in a little bit that I need to get ready for. But unless anybody else has any questions, I am going to peace out for now. Next Thursday, I'll actually probably have some more thoughts, by the way, on creative. I'm doing much of experimentation right now with different things we can do in creative to help nudge the AI into the right direction to show our ads to the right people. So I'll have some more thoughts on that next week, because I think that's going to be the topic for the rest of the year. How do we do that? Oh yeah, absolutely. I've seen some studies about that too. Our phones have been, for the last 15 years, what are called an external brain, but they've only been research and knowledge gaining and entertainment levels external brain. They haven't actually been doing cognitive work for us that much. A little bit, but not that much. But with AI, the cognitive work has moved to our external brain as well. Yeah, our brains are going to atrophy as a result, which is why I use AI as little as possible. Thanks, Dharma. I shall have an awesome weekend. Thank you, Judith. We're pretty stoked about our new home. It already feels like a cozy home to us, mostly when there aren't people using sawzalls in the basement cutting through things. But it's definitely getting there. All right. Is the class on the Writing Wives website? Yep, that's where it is, Dharma, on the storytellerlab.net. If you go to the Writing Wives, the main page just takes you to where we run all of our courses now. So you can go there, and it should direct you. But storytellerlab.net, if you sign up there, that will get you in. I don't think we've actually put in the calendar the exact days that the class is starting, although Jill might have done that because she was working on it yesterday. But it'll be, I believe the first class is next Friday that we'll be starting talking about all this stuff. No, that's awesome, Tim. Good luck. All right, and thanks everybody. I will see you next week. I'm going to be like on the march. Lunch with Mal is going to become super duper consistent again. So you'll be seeing lots of me, and I'll be seeing lots of you. Ciao.